In the fall of 1988, a mother and her 10-year-old son vanished on their way home from church. Their car was found neatly parked by the roadside, keys still in the ignition, 2 half-eaten sandwiches in the front seat. 37 years later, a construction crew digging through a quiet stretch of highway outside Beaumont, Texas, uncovers a sealed underground bunker with 2 chairs, 2 plates, and a note that simply says, "Not yet safe." Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because tonight, we're going beneath the pines. October 1988, East Texas. The woods were already turning gold that year, the kind of quiet, endless autumn where time felt stretched thin. Linda Marsh gripped the steering wheel of her brown Pontiac as the last light bled through the treetops. Her son Evan sat in the passenger seat, pressing his nose to the cold window glass, watching the pine needles whip by. They had just left evening service at St. Andrew's Church. Linda's hands were still trembling from the whispered argument she'd had with her husband that morning. Words that curdled into silence before she and Evan slipped away. "Mom?" Evan said softly. "Are we lost?" "No, sweetheart," she lied, voice tight. "We're just taking the long way." The road narrowed. Pines crowded in, blotting out the sky. Linda slowed, glancing into the rearview mirror. The same black pickup had been behind them since the church parking lot. Its headlights cut through the mist like twin needles of light. She turned left onto the unmarked forest road, one she remembered from her childhood, when her father used to hunt deer here. Gravel pinged against the chassis. The truck followed, steady and unhurried. "Mom, he's still—" "I know." When she reached the clearing, Linda killed the engine. For a moment, only the sound of wind through the branches. Then, a distant hum of an engine idling. She took Evan's hand. "We're going to play a hiding game," she whispered. "Stay very quiet." They slipped into the trees. Behind them, the truck door creaked open. Boots crushed leaves. Linda moved quickly, heart pounding. She had one place in mind, an old storm shelter her father once showed her, half buried beneath a tangle of roots. She'd thought it was gone after a storm years ago. But when she brushed aside the pine needles, there it was. A metal hatch, rusted but intact. Evan's eyes were wide. "What is this place?" "Safety," she said, pulling the handle. The hatch groaned. The darkness below smelled of earth and iron. She guided him down the ladder, one rung at a time, and followed, sealing the door behind them. The last sliver of daylight vanished as the latch clicked shut. They were never seen again. Present day. August 2025. The first clue was the smell. Not rot exactly, more like damp metal and old wood, the scent of something sealed away for too long. It was just after 8 a.m. when the crew from Gulfway Construction hit the concrete slab. The site foreman, Rick Hanlon, had assumed it was an old septic tank. But when they uncovered a rusted hatch, the mood shifted. "Hey, boss," one of the workers called. "You'd better see this." Rick knelt beside the hole. The hatch was perfectly square, reinforced with steel beams. He ran a gloved hand over the surface and felt raised lettering beneath the rust. "Property of Civil Defense, 1959. "Storm shelter?" another man suggested. Rick frowned. Could be, but it wasn't on any map, and they'd checked the blueprints for this stretch of Highway 287. Nothing. By noon, a county sheriff's cruiser had arrived, followed by a white forensic van. Detective Hannah Pierce stepped out, squinting against the Texas sun. Her boots crunched over gravel as she approached the excavation site. "Morning, Sheriff," she greeted, shaking hands with Sheriff Dalton. "Morning. Crew found this old hatch about 6 feet down. Looks sealed from the outside. You might want to have your team take a look before we pop it." Hannah crouched near the edge. The metal was welded shut in several places. Crude, recent welds, not the original construction. Someone had wanted this place closed. Who welded it? She asked, judging by the oxidation. Maybe within the last decade. She straightened, a prickle running down her neck. So someone knew it was here. Maybe, Dalton said. But get this, GPS says we're less than half a mile from where Linda Marsh's car was found in '88. That name made Hannah pause. The Marsh case was Beaumont's oldest unsolved disappearance. A mother and son vanished after church, their car discovered neatly parked at the edge of the forest. Hannah had been 3 years old then, but she'd grown up hearing her mother whisper about the lady and her boy who got swallowed by the pines. By late afternoon, the forensic team had cleared the area and cut through the welds. When the hatch finally groaned open, a rush of cold, stale air spilled out. They lowered a camera into the darkness. At first, the feed showed only concrete and shadows. Then, a glimpse of furniture, a table, 2 metal chairs, a shelf lined with canned goods, everything coated in fine gray dust. But what caught Hannah's attention wasn't the furniture. It was the message scrawled in faded black paint across the far wall. Not yet safe. The air inside was heavy, almost suffocating. When she descended the ladder, her flashlight beam caught the outline of 2 plates still set on the table, one smaller than the other. "Don't touch anything," she murmured to the tech behind her. To the right of the table sat 2 chairs, side by side. On one rested a small toy, a red matchbox car, perfectly preserved beneath a thin film of dust. "Get me an evidence bag," she said quietly. When she picked up the toy, a folded paper fell from beneath it. She unfolded it with gloved hands. The ink was faded but legible. "If anyone finds this place, we were here. It wasn't an accident." Hannah felt her pulse quicken. "We need to secure this entire area," she said, "and get the State Historical Registry on standby. If this connects to Marsh, it's about to get Big Dalton whistled lowly." "You think this is their bunker?" Hannah didn't answer. Her flashlight swept over the concrete again. That phrase, "not yet safe," looked freshly painted compared to the rest of the bunker. The paint hadn't aged the same way. "Sheriff," she said slowly, "what if this place wasn't open from the inside?" Dalton frowned. "You think someone sealed it after they were gone?" She nodded. "Or while they were still in it." Outside, the pines swayed in the hot breeze, their whispering branches sounding almost like voices, and beneath them, the past had just begun to breathe again. By the time dusk fell, the bunker site looked like a film set. Generator lights casting long white beams across the excavation, deputies moving like silhouettes in the dust. Detective Hannah Pierce stood at the perimeter, arms folded, watching the evidence techs photograph the hatch from every angle. Her notepad was already half filled with questions that refused to settle. The toy car, the painted words, the freshness of the welds. She scribbled, "Not yet safe." Who's it addressed to? A light drizzle began, beating on her jacket. The smell of wet pine rose from the forest, earthy and electric. Sheriff Dalton approached with 2 paper cups of coffee. "State Lab sending a crew tomorrow. Says this thing's likely Cold War vintage. Civil defense shelter. Maybe privately modified later. Private ownership would fit," Hannah said. Marsh family land used to stretch to this ridge. Her father built fallout shelters in the 50s. He died before the disappearance. Dalton took a sip. So maybe she remembered one of his projects and used it. Maybe. Hannah's eyes stayed fixed on the hole. But who welded it shut decades later? They fell into silence, listening to the soft hum of the generator. Just before midnight, Hannah returned to her hotel in town. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying the image of those 2 chairs. She opened her laptop, pulled up the digitized Beaumont Chronicle archives, and typed, "Linda Marsh disappearance, 1988. The first headline, "Local. Mother and son feared lost in woods below it." A photo, Linda, mid-30s, kind eyes, hair swept back, holding Evan's shoulders. He grinned, a missing front tooth showing. She stared at the photo. There was something quietly defiant in Linda's posture, as if she'd already decided to protect her son from something invisible. Click after click brought the old investigation back to life. Failed searches, speculation of domestic trouble, sightings that led nowhere. But one article caught her attention, a follow-up from 1995. Anonymous tip claims marsh woman found safety shelter in National Forest. Sheriff's office dismisses rumor. The article mentioned the tip had come from a former construction worker familiar with 1950s fallout sites. No name given. Hannah leaned back, rubbing her temples. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. She clicked the next file. Evidence. Polaroids from crime scene. The photos of the Pontiac were grainy but clear. The car parked neatly by the roadside, driver's door closed, 2 sandwiches in wax paper on the console, a date scribbled in blue pen at the bottom, October 16th, 1988. 37 years ago tomorrow. Morning came gray and humid. Hannah returned to the site with 2 forensic specialists. One, a quiet man named Dr. Kane, was an expert in preservation environments. Inside the bunker, the air felt even heavier. They'd installed temporary lighting, which made the space look smaller. Dust motes drifted like ash. Kane knelt by the table. "Remarkable microclimate," he murmured. "Low humidity. Explains why everything's intact." He set out instruments, testing air composition. Carbon dioxide levels slightly elevated. Something biological may have decomposed here long ago, but not human remains. No strong volatile compounds, so they left, Hannah said. Or were moved. Hannah's gaze fell again on the words, "Not yet safe." She approached the wall. The paint's edges were crisp, its black still glossy. "Newer than the dust suggests," Kane noted. 10 years, maybe less. "So someone came back recently." Kane nodded, and left the message. The discovery unsettled her more than bones would have. Outside, reporters had begun to gather. Sheriff Dalton held them at bay with a brief statement. Historical site, possible connection to an old missing persons case. As Hannah climbed out of the pit, a woman broke through the crowd barrier. Elderly, thin, wearing a pale blue cardigan despite the heat. "Detective Pierce," she called, voice trembling. Please tell me if you found her." Dalton moved to intervene, but Hannah raised a hand. "Ma'am, who are you?" "Name's Alice Denning. Linda Marsh was my sister." The crowd noise seemed to drop away. Hannah guided the woman toward the shade of a tent. "I thought everyone from the family moved north years ago," Hannah said gently. Alice shook her head. "I stayed. I couldn't leave her behind." Hannah hesitated. "Mrs. Denning, the site might relate to your sister's disappearance, but we're not certain yet." Tears welled in the woman's eyes. "She used to talk about those woods. Said our daddy built a shelter there for storms. After she went missing, I dreamed she was inside, knocking to get out. But nobody could hear. Hannah felt the small hairs rise on her arms. Did anyone else know about the shelter?" Alice hesitated. "A man named Vernon Vern Lee Howe, Daddy's old partner. He kept maps of all the bunkers they built, but he died in 1994, or so we thought." "So we thought." "Someone mailed me a postcard 5 years ago," Alice whispered. "Postmarked Oklahoma. No return address. Just 2 words. Not yet." Hannah stared at her. "Do you still have it?" Alice nodded. "At home, in my Bible." "Don't move it," Hannah said. "I'll come by this afternoon." As the old woman walked away, Hannah turned back toward the pine line where wind rippled through the needles. Somewhere out there, someone had been watching this forest for decades, waiting for the right moment to open the ground again. The postcard sat pressed between the onion-thin pages of Revelation. Faded ink on cheap cardstock, the kind you'd buy at a roadside gas station. The image showed a sunset over Lake Texoma. Across the sky, written in uneven capitals, "Not yet." Hannah photographed both sides carefully, then sealed it in an evidence sleeve. "Same handwriting as the bunker wall?" Dalton asked. "Too early to tell," she said, "but similar slant." Alice watched nervously from her recliner. The small house smelled of lavender and dust. Photographs of children and weddings lined every surface. "He wasn't evil," Alice said suddenly. "Who?" "Daddy. People said he built bunkers for rich men hiding from war, but that wasn't true. He built them for families like us, thought the world would burn one day." Linda was his favorite. Maybe that's why she remembered. Hannah closed her notebook. "Do you recall Vern Howe's full name or relatives?" "Vernon Lee Howe. Had a son, I think. Lived near Jasper. They called the boy Rusty outside. The afternoon sky darkened with a hint of rain." Hannah promised to return with updates, then drove back toward the forest. At the command tent, new evidence awaited. A lab tech handed her a sealed container. Inside lay a piece of torn denim, child-sized, found beneath a loose floor panel in the bunker. Stains marred the fabric near the seam. Kane approached. "We'll run DNA, but preliminary luminol suggests blood. Old, degraded, but present." Hannah swallowed hard. "That changes everything." Dalton muttered, "So maybe they didn't both walk out." They spent the next hours documenting the find, every movement recorded on camera. As dusk fell, a sudden flash of lightning illuminated the tree line. Hannah caught sight of movement, just a flicker, between the trunks. "Hold the light," she said, stepping toward the woods. Rain began to fall. She reached the edge of the clearing, scanning with her flashlight. Nothing but dripping branches. Yet the mud showed a distinct pattern. Fresh boot prints leading away from the site. Someone had been standing there, watching. She radioed 2 deputies to sweep the perimeter, but the prints disappeared into thicker brush. Back at her vehicle, she pulled the hood of her rain jacket tighter and stared once more at the phrase painted inside the bunker. "Not yet safe." Whoever had returned to that place still believed danger lingered, and maybe it did. Later that night, Hannah reviewed the photos of the boot prints under fluorescent light. Wide tread, industrial pattern, size 11 or 12. New, not 1980s vintage. She leaned back in her chair, fatigue washing over her. Every cold case she'd reopened in her career had followed the same rhythm. At first, the dead were quiet, cooperative. Then, once disturbed, they began to whisper. A text buzzed on her phone. "Sheriff, 911 dispatch got anonymous call." Male voice said, "Stop digging or the girl dies again." Her stomach turned. Dalton's follow-up text came seconds later. Caller hung up before trace. Sounded old. Rough southern drawl. "The girl dies again." Hannah closed her eyes. The only girl in this case had been 10 years old in 1988. The wind outside the motel moaned through the pines like a low human voice. Somewhere in that sound, she thought she could almost hear the scrape of metal, the echo of a hatch closing. Tomorrow would mark 37 years to the day since Linda Marsh and her son vanished. And tonight, someone still wanted them hidden. October 16th, 2025. Anniversary Day. Dawn came muted, a gray sheet of light seeping through the pines. Rain had stopped, but the air still hung heavy, smelling of sap and iron. Detective Hannah Pierce parked her sedan at the site, headlights cutting through the mist. Deputies were already there, setting perimeter lights, their voices low. An anniversary always drew attention. Reporters, locals with flowers, conspiracy theorists with cameras. Hannah walked straight to the bunker. Overnight, the techs had placed portable dehumidifiers and evidence markers. The interior looked less like a tomb now, more like a stage frozen mid-scene. She stood before the table again. 2 plates, 2 cups. A silence so dense she could almost hear the ghosts breathing. Dr. Kane arrived, holding a tablet. DNA from the denim scrap came back. Hannah's pulse quickened. Tell me. Partial match to an existing profile. Evan Marsh. She exhaled slowly. So he bled in there. Trace suggests small wound. Could be an accident. No sign of adult blood. Meaning Linda could still have walked out. Maybe. Kane's eyes flicked toward the wall. But the blood isn't the most interesting part. The chemical makeup of the dust shows layers. Top layer no older than 10 years. Someone disturbed this place recently, resealed it, and wrote that message. Hannah nodded grimly. And that someone made the call last night. By noon, television vans lined the road. Reporters filmed against the police tape while drone cameras hovered. Hannah hated the circus. Truth drowned easily in noise. She met Sheriff Dalton near the command tent. He handed her a thermos. Coffee, no sugar. Heard you didn't sleep. Didn't try, she said. He hesitated. You think the caller could be this Vern Howe character? If he's still alive, maybe. But we need confirmation he even existed beyond those old records. Dalton flipped through a folder. We ran motor vehicle archives. Vernon Lee Howe, born 1927, presumed dead 1994. Body never recovered after cabin fire near Jasper. Presumed, Hannah repeated, meaning no remains. Dalton nodded. You think he faked it? I think someone mailed Alice Denning a postcard 5 years ago in his handwriting. A pause. Wind moved through the trees like slow breath. Dalton said quietly, You ever get the feeling the past isn't buried? It's waiting? She gave a small, humorless smile. Every day. Late afternoon, Hannah returned alone to the bunker. The crews had gone for the day, leaving generators humming softly. She descended the ladder, flashlight beams slicing the gloom. Near the back wall, she noticed something the earlier sweep had missed. A hairline crack in the concrete, just wide enough for fingers. She pried gently with a flat tool until a small panel shifted. Behind it lay a rusted tin box. Inside, a bundle of photographs wrapped in wax paper. She lifted one into the light. Linda Marsh, sitting on the bunker floor, smiling faintly at the camera. Her son beside her, clutching the same red toy car now bagged in evidence. The photos were dated November 1988, weeks after they supposedly vanished. Her breath caught. They live down here. She flipped through the stack. The final image showed only Linda, eyes hollow, holding a sheet of paper up to the lens. Scrawled words read, If he finds us, bury this place. A cold dread crept through her chest. Who was he? Before she could dwell, a soft creak echoed from above, the hatch shifting. Hannah froze, listening. No voices, just wind. Still, she climbed out fast. The forest beyond looked empty, but the sense of being watched lingered like static. That night she locked the photographs in evidence storage, logged every detail. Yet when she lay in bed hours later, one image wouldn't leave her. Linda's eyes, alert, terrified, staring straight through time. Morning broke hot and bright. The forest steamed after the rain, light pooling like honey through the branches. Hannah met Dr. Kane at the mobile lab parked beside the ditch. He was studying the photos she'd found. Film stock matches late 80s Polaroid. Processing chemicals consistent. No sign of forgery, so they were alive at least a month after disappearance, she said. Kane nodded. Possibly longer. Look here. Each image has subtle lighting differences. They had electricity. Portable generator, maybe. Hannah tapped the photo showing Linda's message. If he finds us, bury this place. She wanted whoever discovered this to seal it. Kane frowned, which someone eventually did. They shared a silence heavy with implication. Later, Hannah drove to the county archives in Jasper. The clerk, a young woman with coffee-stained sleeves, helped pull microfilm files on Vernon Howe. Article, Local contractor dies in cabin fire. Small photo, grizzled man with welding goggles around his neck. Fire ruled accidental. No body recovered. Another clipping, 5 months earlier. Howe questioned in disappearance of Beaumont family. No charges filed. She exhaled. There it is. The clerk looked up. You think he's alive? I think he built a prison and called it shelter. Before leaving, Hannah scanned one last file. Property records, 1958 to 1989. Her eyes widened. Several bunker sites registered under an alias, H.L. Mason. The same alias appeared on a deed transfer dated 1993, after Howe's supposed death. Whoever H.L. Mason was, he'd kept buying land around Beaumont, forming a ring of hidden parcels that all touched the same stretch of forest. Driving back, she phoned Dalton. I think the man who sealed the bunker used the name H.L. Mason. We need to cross-check any surviving relatives. Dalton's voice crackled. Copy that, and you better get back here fast. We've got movement. What kind of movement? Somebody broke into the evidence trailer, nothing taken except those Polaroids. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. When? Half an hour ago. Guard swears he saw a man in a tan work jacket running toward the tree line. Hannah accelerated, gravel spraying. Send units to cut him off. By the time she reached the site, deputies were combing the forest. Tracks led north, deeper into the pines, before disappearing on hard ground. She entered the empty evidence trailer. The lock hung twisted. The drawer where the photos had been was ripped open, metal bent. Whoever did it knew exactly what to take. She studied the torn filing labels, tiny curls of paper on the floor. On one scrap, the corner of a photograph remained, showing a fragment of a face. Not Linda's. A man's jawline, streaked with soot, eyes out of frame. Was it Vernon Howe? She pocketed the fragment, then walked outside. The sun burned through the haze, casting long shadows between the trees. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure at the far ridge, motionless, watching. Then it was gone. That evening, back at her motel, Hannah pinned copies of every document to the corkboard she carried in her car trunk, a personal ritual for cold cases. At the center, she placed the word in bold marker, safe. Lines radiated outward. Linda Marsh, Evan Marsh, Shelter, Vernon Howe, H.L. Mason. She stared at the connections until her eyes blurred. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A man's rasping voice. You're digging where no light belongs. Who is this? Not yet safe, he said softly. Then the line went dead. Hannah sat motionless, listening to the dial tone. Outside, the cicadas screamed, the forest alive with unseen movement. The investigation was no longer about the dead. Someone out there was still guarding the secret. And now, he knew her name. The next morning, Hannah woke before sunrise. Sleep had been shallow. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the bunker again. The table, the message, the empty chairs. She dressed quickly, clipped her badge to her belt, and stepped out into the damp, pre-dawn air. The motel's neon sign buzzed faintly in the distance, half the letters dead. She could smell rain still trapped in the soil, and for a moment, she just stood there, breathing it in. Something in those woods had outlasted storms, fire, and silence. It was waiting. She started the engine and drove toward the station. Sheriff Dalton was already in the briefing room, coffee in hand, a map of the forest pinned to the wall. Red circles marked the known bunker sites, 5 in total, forming a loose crescent north of Beaumont. Morning, he said, not looking up. You were right about the alias. H.L. Mason purchased all these parcels between 1990 and 1998. No tax filing since. Ownership still active through a trust. Registered to who? He pointed to a name typed in faded ink. E. Howe Trust. Evan? Hannah asked. That's the theory. She frowned. But Evan Marsh would be in his late 40s now. If he survived. Why hide under a false name? Dalton shrugged. Or someone used his identity. Hannah traced the circles with her fingertip. What's this one? Unsurveyed land behind the old sawmill. County records say it's inaccessible. Road washed out years ago. Then that's where we start. The drive took an hour, the road narrowing until it became gravel, then dirt, then just two muddy ruts through thick pine. Branches brushed the windshield like fingers. When they reached the sawmill, only the skeleton of the building remained. Corrugated metal sheets sagging inward, moss covering everything. Dalton parked beside a fallen sign that read, Harris Timber Company, established 1948. Creepy as hell, he muttered. Hannah stepped out, flashlight in hand. The forest hummed with insects. Somewhere deeper in the trees, water trickled. A creek, maybe. They pushed through undergrowth until the old mill disappeared behind them. After 10 minutes of hiking, Hannah's boot struck something solid beneath the leaves. She knelt and brushed away the debris. Metal, flat. Another hatch. Got something, she called. Dalton joined her, shining his light over the rusted handle. It was smaller than the first bunker's entrance, half hidden by roots. No recent welds this time, but the padlock was new. Stainless steel, unweathered. Someone's been maintaining this, she said. Dalton looked uneasy. We don't have a warrant for private property. Probable cause will hold. This connects to a double disappearance and a threat on an officer. We're going in. She drew a deep breath, then snapped the lock with bolt cutters from her pack. The hatch gave a reluctant groan. Cold air drifted up, tinged with the smell of mildew and something faintly chemical. Hannah descended first. The ladder led into a narrow corridor of concrete. Her flashlight beam caught shelves lined with jars, canned goods, stacks of water jugs. At the far end stood a small living space. Bed, desk, portable radio. Everything was neat. Too neat. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, powered by a humming generator in the corner. Dalton climbed down behind her. Well, someone's still calling this home. Hannah moved slowly toward the desk. Papers lay stacked in perfect order. Maps, hand-drawn diagrams of underground structures, and notes written in a tight, methodical script. One page stopped her cold. It bore the title Subject EM. She read aloud. Growth stable. Memory conditioning successful. Exposure to daylight limited. Reinforced security perimeter. Outside world not safe. Dalton's voice was low. Memory conditioning. She swallowed. If EM stands for Evan Marsh, then whoever wrote this was keeping him down here. There were more pages. Medical records, sketches of the boy's face, timelines of behavioral experiments. Another file bore the initials LM, Linda Marsh. Most entries ended abruptly, except the last. Subject deteriorating. Requests to leave increasing. Solution, isolate permanently. Dalton stepped back, muttering, Jesus. Hannah stared at the words until her throat tightened. He didn't protect them. He trapped them. She turned toward the far wall and froze. A set of handprints marked the concrete, small, smeared in rust-colored stains, preserved like fossils. Dalton whispered, Blood? She nodded. Old. Maybe decades. They photographed everything before leaving. Outside, daylight seemed too bright after the underground gloom. The forest felt altered, every tree concealing a secret door. Back at the truck, Dalton radioed for backup to secure the site. Hannah leaned against the hood, rubbing her temples. Whoever lived here wrote those notes like a scientist, she said. Clinical detachment, organized mind, but the paranoia, outside world not safe, that's straight from Linda's message. Dalton nodded. Maybe Howe convinced her the surface was poisoned. Maybe he convinced himself, or someone else continued his work. The hum of cicadas swelled until it drowned their voices. Look at the dates, Hannah said, holding up one of the copied pages. Last entry, April 1995, a year after Howe's supposed death. Dalton exhaled. So he didn't die, or he passed it to someone who believed the same delusion. She folded the paper, slid it into her folder, and looked toward the endless forest. "Either way," she said quietly, "we've only opened the first door." The day after the second bunker was discovered, the investigation shifted from curiosity to obsession. Reporters were now camping along the forest road, and the county had to erect barriers. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their rotors scattering the scent of pine and damp earth. Detective Hannah Pierce barely noticed them. She'd spent the night in her office, surrounded by copies of the bunker notes, photographs, and a single object that refused to leave her mind: the red toy car, now sealed in a plastic case beside her desk. She turned it over in her gloved hand. On the underside, faint letters were scratched into the metal. 2E, for when we drive home. Her throat tightened. A mother's promise turned artifact. She placed it down carefully and turned to the stack of files Dr. Kane had brought from the second bunker. Among the medical notes and drawings, one folder bore a different texture: a leather-bound notebook, edges curled from moisture. Inside, the writing was uneven, desperate. December 1st, 1988. He says the air above is poisoned. I don't believe him, but Evan does. I can't let him see me cry. He checks the hatch every night to make sure it's locked. Sometimes I think he's locking us in. Hannah's pulse quickened. "Linda," she whispered. Page after page chronicled the slow collapse of sanity. The flickering generator, the dwindling supplies, Evan's nightmares. Then, near the end, March 1989, heard voices through the vent. A truck. I called out. He was faster. Told me they'd come for us, take us away. He welded the door shut. The handwriting grew shaky, letters pressed deep into the paper. April. Evan is coughing. I told him stories about the sky. The final line: "If you ever read this, I tried." Hannah closed the notebook gently. The room felt smaller. By afternoon, she and Sheriff Dalton met again with Dr. Kane to catalog the finds. The forensics tent smelled of latex and dust. "Fingerprints?" Hannah asked. "Partial prints on the generator and jars." Kane said, "No match in databases." But I ran the handwriting. The notebook matches Linda Marsh's letters from the 1980s. So she wrote those entries herself. Yes, and the final pages of the medical files. Different handwriting entirely. "Could be mail," later dated Dalton frowned, meaning someone came back years later and added to the records. Kane nodded. "Exactly. The ink composition confirms it. Early 2000s ballpoint." Hannah leaned on the table. "So the same person who sealed the first bunker returned to this one decades later." She exhaled. "We're chasing a ghost who keeps editing history." That evening, Hannah drove back toward the forest. The sky had bruised into indigo. Fireflies blinked like sparks. She pulled onto a dirt shoulder and killed the headlights. For a moment, she simply listened. Crickets, wind, the distant rumble of thunder. Her radio crackled. Dalton's voice. "You still out there?" "Yeah, just needed air." "Keep your phone on. We're pulling county records for that trust." Something weird turned up. Funds withdrawn last month. Her heart jolted. "By who?" "Signature reads E. Howe. Bank's verifying now." She looked out across the dark pines. "So he's alive." "Or someone wants us to think he is." Lightning flared silently in the distance. Hannah felt the old chill return, the sense that the forest itself was listening. She drove deeper down the dirt road, toward the sawmill again. The air was thick with humidity. When she reached the clearing, her headlights caught something glinting near the bunker hatch. She stopped, stepped out, flashlight in hand. The glint resolved into a metal thermos lying on its side, still beating with condensation. Fresh. Her pulse quickened. She crouched, touching the damp grass. Still pressed flat where someone had been sitting. A twig cracked behind her. "Sheriff?" she called softly. No answer. She turned, scanning the trees. The beam of her flashlight caught a face, pale, motionless, half hidden behind a trunk. "Stop right there," she shouted. The figure flinched, then stepped forward slowly, hands raised. A man, maybe late 40s, thin, clothes torn and dirty, hair streaked with gray. His eyes caught the light, frightened, wild, and strangely childlike. "Who are you?" Hannah demanded. He swallowed, voice hoarse. "I'm not supposed to talk." "Did you leave this?" She lifted the thermos. He shook his head violently. "He watches. Always watches." "Who does?" The man's breathing quickened. "You shouldn't have opened the door." "Not yet safe." The phrase froze her where she stood. "Tell me your name." He hesitated, then whispered, "Evan." The air seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hannah took a careful step closer. "Evan Marsh?" His gaze darted past her toward the woods. "He'll come if you say it too loud." "Who?" "My father." She frowned. "Your father's name was Daniel Marsh." Evan shook his head, trembling. "No, not him. The other one, the one who kept us safe." Before she could respond, a gunshot cracked through the forest. Bark exploded beside her head. She dove to the ground. Evan screamed and bolted into the darkness. "Evan!" she yelled, scrambling to her feet. Another shot. This one farther away. Then silence. She aimed her flashlight through the trees, but only darkness stared back. Her radio hissed to life. Dalton's panicked voice. "Pierce! You copy? We heard shots. I'm okay," she gasped. "Suspect fled into the woods. Possible live fire from unknown location. Hold position. We're en route." She lowered the radio, heart hammering. The forest had gone utterly still. Somewhere in that silence, she thought she heard the faint creak of metal, the sound of a hatch closing. Flashlights carved trembling cones through the trees as deputies spread across the clearing. Rain had begun again, a thin drizzle whispering through the pines. Hannah stood near the hatch, her clothes streaked with mud, adrenaline still coursing like static. Sheriff Dalton approached, panting. "You all right?" She nodded. "He was here, Dalton." Evan Marsh. A live Dalton froze mid-step. "You're sure?" I asked his name. He said Evan. About 40, thin, terrified. He said someone was watching Dalton rub the back of his neck. Could be an imposter. People get obsessed with these old cases. "Then who fired the shots?" He didn't answer. A deputy called from the tree line. "Found shell casings." They walked to where 2 brass shells glimmered under the flashlight. Hannah crouched beside them. .22 caliber. Small, close-range weapon. Dalton frowned. "He wasn't trying to kill you. Warning shots." She nodded slowly. Or to scare Evan back into hiding. By dawn, the rain had thickened to a steady downpour. They called off the search at sunrise. Visibility had dropped to nothing. Hannah sat in her car, engine running for warmth, eyes fixed on the forest. Somewhere in that green-black maze, Evan Marsh was alive. The boy who had vanished 37 years ago. She closed her eyes briefly. What kind of man had he become? The frightened child from the photos, or something shaped by whoever kept them safe? Her radio buzzed. Dalton again. "Get back to base. Dr. Kane's got something." The lab trailer smelled of coffee and damp paper. Kane stood over the evidence table, holding a plastic sleeve. Inside lay a scrap of fabric, dark green canvas, stained and torn. "This was caught on the barbed wire fence near the clearing," he said. "I ran a rapid test. The DNA matches the blood sample from the first bunker. It's Evans. Hannah's pulse quickened. So he was definitely here last night." Kane nodded. "And he's injured. Fresh blood. Maybe from grazing a tree when he ran." She studied the torn edge. "Any idea what kind of clothing?" "Military surplus jacket. Early 2000s issue. Common in surplus stores." But here's the interesting part. Embedded in the fibers were trace amounts of petroleum jelly mixed with red iron oxide. Meaning, homemade rust inhibitor, used for preserving metal underground. Hannah looked at him sharply. Someone's still maintaining those bunkers. That afternoon, she returned to the sawmill clearing, this time alone. The rain had stopped, leaving the forest steaming. Her boots squelched in the mud as she retraced Evan's path. At the edge of a ravine, she found boot prints, one deep, one lighter, heading downslope. The heavier prints turned abruptly toward a cluster of boulders. She followed. Behind the rocks, the ground dropped away into a natural depression thick with ferns. There, half hidden beneath branches, was a rusted ventilation pipe. She knelt and brushed it clear. Warm air flowed from within, faint but real. She whispered, "You're still down there." Pulling out her phone, she marked the GPS coordinates. Then she stood and scanned the trees. No sound but dripping leaves. Yet her instinct screamed she wasn't alone. "Evan?" she called softly. No reply. Then faintly, from somewhere deeper, a single broken word. "Help!" She spun, flashlight cutting across the trees. "Evan? Where are you?" Silence. Then movement. A flicker between trunks, a shadow darting left. She chased it, slipping on wet leaves, heart hammering. The figure broke into a clearing and vanished behind a cluster of fallen logs. "Stop!" she shouted. "I can help you!" No answer. Only the echo of her own breath. She approached the logs carefully and saw a small object resting on the moss. A Polaroid photograph. Her gloved fingers trembled as she picked it up. The image showed a child, Evan at 8 years old, standing beside a man whose face was hidden by shadow. The man's hand rested possessively on the boy's shoulder. Behind them, carved into the wooden wall of the bunker, were the words, "The safe below." Her stomach turned. She turned the photo over. On the back, written in shaky blue ink, "He still lives here." Back at headquarters, Dalton stared at the photograph, his jaw tight. So somebody's using that forest as a network. A whole series of bunkers. Not somebody, Hannah said quietly. The same mind that built the first, or whoever inherited it. Dalton looked unconvinced. If this guy's really Evan, why not come out, tell his story? Because he was raised underground by a man who taught him the world above was poison. Dalton sighed. So he's hiding from the light, and whoever shot at you's keeping him there. Hannah nodded grimly. And that means our shooter wasn't aiming at me. He was corralling Evan back toward the vents. They fell silent. Outside, thunder rumbled again, distant but steady, like something vast moving beneath the earth. Later that night, unable to rest, Hannah sat on her motel bed with the Polaroid on her lap. The boy's face looked both innocent and knowing, eyes wide with a strange calm. The calm of someone who's never seen the sky. Her phone buzzed. Text message, unlisted number, "Stop digging. He belongs here." Her stomach dropped. She typed back quickly. "Who is this?" No reply. She set the phone down, pulse racing, and stared at the photograph again. The words on the back, "He still lives here," seemed almost to shimmer in the lamplight. Somewhere out there, in that tangle of pines, the boy who'd grown into a ghost was alive. And someone, unseen, still called him safe. The next morning broke bright and merciless. The storm had washed the forest clean, leaving the air sharp with resin. At the sheriff's office, Hannah spread the latest evidence across the conference table. Maps, photos, and the note from the back of the Polaroid. "He still lives here." Dr. Kane arrived carrying a laptop. "We ran a spatial overlay," he said, connecting cables. On the screen, satellite images blinked to life. "See these heat anomalies? Pockets of consistent warmth underground. They line up perfectly with the old bunker network," he zoomed in. "And this one, right here, beneath a stretch of private hunting land owned by the E. Howe Trust, registered an active generator last night." Dalton leaned closer. "Meaning someone's living down there now?" Hannah's stomach nodded. "That has to be the safe below." Kane nodded. "If the structure's still intact, it's not Cold War construction anymore. This one's newer, poured concrete, commercial-grade ventilation. Whoever built it knew what they were doing. Hannah exhaled. Then we're not chasing ghosts. We're chasing a continuation. They set out before noon, Dalton, Hannah, and 2 deputies, following a maintenance trail through the forest until the dirt path gave way to tall grass and tangled briars. The land had once been logged, but decades of neglect had let the pines reclaim everything. After a mile of hiking, they reached a chain-link fence topped with rusted barbed wire. A no trespassing sign dangled from one hinge. Beyond it, the forest floor dipped toward a clearing where sunlight glinted off something metallic. Hannah crouched, scanning through binoculars. "Vent pipes," she murmured. 4 of them, square formation. "Airflow system," Dalton muttered. "Looks military." They cut the fence and moved quietly toward the center of the clearing. The hum of machinery grew louder, low, steady, mechanical breathing. Beneath a camouflaged tarp, half buried under pine needles, was a concrete hatch fitted with a modern keypad lock. "Can you get us in?" Dalton asked. Hannah examined the panel. The surface was scratched, smeared with mud. Numbers 1, 3, 8, and 9 bore heavy wear. She punched in a sequence, 1, 3, 8, 9. The keypad beeped red. She tried again, reversing it. 9-8-3-1. A soft click answered. The hatch lifted easily, as if recently oiled. Cold air rushed out, sterile, metallic, humming faintly with the sound of generators below. Dalton raised his flashlight. "After you." Hannah descended the ladder. The air inside smelled of antiseptic and dust. Unlike the older bunkers, this one was bright. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The corridor walls were clean, the floor swept. She moved slowly, gun drawn. The passage opened into a large chamber, about 20 feet wide, lined with metal shelving. Supplies were neatly stacked: food cans, bottled water, medical kits. A portable cot stood against one wall, blanket folded military tight. On the opposite side sat a long desk with a row of monitors. All dark except one, which showed static. A camera feed. Dalton joined her. "Whoever's running this place isn't far." Hannah's gaze fell to the desk surface. An open notebook filled with the same cramped handwriting from the older files. Subject E stable. Exposure above ground induced panic. Correction administered. Memory anchors reinforced. She flipped another page. Detective present. Observe pattern before relocation. The world remains unsafe. Dalton read over her shoulder. "That's you." She looked up sharply. "He's been watching." A sudden creak echoed from deeper in the tunnel. Both turned toward the sound, footsteps slow and deliberate, coming from the far corridor. Hannah raised her weapon. "Show yourself." A figure stepped into the light. It was Evan. His clothes were cleaner than before, hair damp, eyes clearer, but there was something vacant behind them, like the surface of still water. "Evan," she said, lowering the gun slightly. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm here to help." He blinked, voice soft. "He said you'd come." "Who? The man who built this?" Evan hesitated, glancing toward the ceiling. "He doesn't like noise. The world up there. It's poison." "He saved us." Hannah took a slow step forward. "Evan, listen to me. That's a lie. You were children. He trapped you." He shook his head violently. "You don't understand. It's worse up there. People vanish. People lie." Dalton kept his weapon ready but said nothing. Hannah tried a different tone, gentler. "Do you remember your mother?" For the first time, his face softened. She wanted to leave. He told her the sickness would take her. She didn't believe him. His voice cracked. Then one day, she was gone. "She died down there, didn't she?" Tears filled his eyes. "He said she went above." "And you believed him." Evan's silence was answer enough. Then, faintly, from the speaker mounted near the ceiling, a man's voice rasped, "That's far enough, Detective Pierce." Hannah froze. "Who is this?" You've seen enough to know the truth. The world poisons everything it touches. Down here, life endures. Don't make the same mistake she did. Hannah's heart hammered. Where are you? The voice chuckled softly. Close enough to see that you brought company. Dalton whispered, We've got external transmission. He's patched into the intercom. The voice continued, calm and steady. Evan, step back from her. She'll take you outside. You'll choke on the light. Evan's gaze flickered between them, confusion twisting his face. Hannah reached out. You're not sick, Evan. Look at me. I've been above all my life. He looked at her hands, clean, unburned. His lips trembled. He said the air kills slow. It doesn't. He lied to keep you here. The intercom hissed with static. Then the voice returned, colder. He's not ready. Leave, or I'll seal this place like the others. A loud metallic thud echoed overhead. The hatch. Dalton swore. He's closing us in. Hannah grabbed Evan's arm. Move! They sprinted down the corridor as the lights flickered red. Somewhere above, gears ground against steel. By the time they reached the ladder, the hatch had begun to slide shut. Dalton threw his shoulder against it, grunting, while Hannah shoved Evan upward. Together they forced the door open just enough to slip through before it slammed closed with a deafening clang. They collapsed in the wet grass, gasping for air. When she looked back, the hatch was gone, covered by a layer of dirt that hadn't been there minutes before. The ground itself seemed to have swallowed it whole. Hannah turned to Evan, who knelt beside her, shaking. Where is he? She asked. Evan stared blankly at the trees. Everywhere down here. He built more. Her voice was barely a whisper. How many, Evan? He lifted his eyes, pale and terrified. 12. The interrogation room smelled faintly of bleach and metal. Morning light slanted through the blinds, striping the table in alternating bands of brightness and shadow. Evan Marsh sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, fingers twisting the hem of his jacket. His hair was damp from a shower, his clothes borrowed from the county locker. Hannah watched him through the glass for a long moment before entering. She'd been awake all night writing reports, replaying the escape, hearing the voice on the intercom every time she closed her eyes. She set a cup of water in front of him. You're safe here, she said. Evan looked up slowly. His eyes, gray, unfocused, drifted toward the ceiling. He said that once, too. She took a seat opposite him. You mean Vernon Howe? He flinched at the name. Don't call him that. What should I call him? Evan's voice dropped to a whisper. Father? Hannah studied him. He wasn't your father, Evan. He raised me, he said, almost defiantly. Taught me how to stay alive when everyone else was gone. She leaned forward. Gone where? Up there. He pointed vaguely toward the ceiling. The sickness, the fire, the noise. He said we were chosen because we listened. Hannah tried to keep her tone calm. There was no sickness. The world didn't end. He lied. Evan's hands clenched. You don't know what it's like down there. The air is still. It listens. He said the world up here hums like a fever. She let the silence stretch until his breathing slowed again. Evan, the woman you called mother, Linda Marsh, she didn't believe him either, did she? His expression faltered. She wanted to go. She said I'd see the stars one day. He told me she was sick. He said she walked out and never came back. Hannah's throat tightened. You didn't see what happened to her? Evan shook his head. He said the air took her. She hesitated. The man who spoke through the intercom yesterday. Was that him? Evan looked confused. He's always there. Sometimes through the vents, sometimes the lights. He says I'm not finished yet. Finished with what? Evan's voice was almost childlike. The work, the safe world. He said when the others are ready, we'll go below again. Hannah's pen paused. Others? He nodded. He brings them sometimes. The quiet ones. They stay for a while. They learn the rules. Her stomach turned. How many, Evan? He looked at her, eyes wide and uncertain. 12. She felt the word land like a physical blow. The 12 bunkers. Outside the observation window, Sheriff Dalton muttered, "We've got a cult case, don't we?" Dr. Kane nodded grimly. Generational conditioning. He's been recruiting replacements. Dalton crossed his arms. If half those bunkers are active, we're sitting on a forest full of buried people. Kane added, and whoever's running this network is still communicating with him. The intercom signal came from an old CB tower north of here. Leased property, same shell. H.L. Mason Family Trust. Dalton turned toward the door. We need a warrant and a team. If there are survivors, we pull them out today. Hours later, Hannah sat alone with Evan again. He'd grown quieter, eyes darting to the corners of the room as if expecting someone to materialize. "You hear him now, don't you?" she asked softly. Evan nodded once. "He doesn't like you. Says you bring the sickness." She folded her hands. "He's afraid." "You're the proof that he lied." A faint smile flickered across Evan's lips. "He said you'd say that too." Her patience thinned. "Evan, listen to me. There's no disease, no poison. You've been breathing open air for 12 hours. You're fine." He blinked slowly. "For now." "Then help me stop him. Help me find the others." Something shifted behind his eyes. Fear and longing tangled together. "He said I'd go back when it was safe." Hannah leaned forward. "You don't have to go back. You can choose for yourself now." He looked down at his hands. "I don't remember how." That night, while deputies escorted Evan to a holding room, Hannah stepped outside into the cool air. The forest loomed black beyond the parking lot, a wall of whispering leaves. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "You brought him into the light. He won't survive there." Her stomach twisted. She typed quickly, "Who is this?" The reply came seconds later. "The world isn't safe yet. You'll see." She looked toward the dark tree line. For a moment, she thought she saw a red light blinking among the pines, like a camera indicator. When she blinked, it was gone. At dawn, Dalton woke her with a call. "We got the warrant. We're heading to that tower site north of here." "On my way," she said, pulling on her jacket. By the time she reached the clearing, the sky was pale gold. The tower rose above the trees, rusted but functional. Wires leading to a small utility shack at its base. 2 deputies waited with bolt cutters. Dalton gestured. "Signal trace ends here." They forced the door open. Inside, the air was cold and chemical, humming with a generator. On the table sat a row of old radio transceivers, all still powered, lights blinking faintly. One was labeled Chapter 12, SafeLink. Kane adjusted a dial. The speakers crackled to life. First static, then a voice. Calm, familiar, chilling. "You can't save him, Detective. He belongs where the noise can't find him." Hannah froze. "Where are you?" "All around you. The roots, the tunnels. The world below is vast." Dalton whispered, "It's a recorded loop." But then the voice changed tone. "Tell Evan he left the door open." A second later, alarms blared at the station 15 miles away. Evan's holding room door had been forced from the inside. By the time Hannah and Dalton raced back, the cell was empty. The guard lay unconscious beside the wall, breathing shallowly. Hannah knelt beside him. "What happened?" The man groaned. "He said he had to go home." She stood, heart hammering. "He's heading back to the forest." Dalton grabbed the radio. "All units, lock down every road to Beaumont Woods. We've got an escapee headed for the bunker sites." Hannah stared through the station window. The pines shimmered in the distance under the rising sun. Somewhere beneath them, the voice was waiting. The sirens began before dawn. Deputies sped down back roads toward the forest, headlights flashing like silent lightning through the mist. Hannah rode in the lead vehicle with Sheriff Dalton, maps and radio chatter filling the space between them. "Unit 3 spotted footprints near the sawmill trail," Dalton said, eyes fixed on the dark road. They're fresh. Hannah gripped the dashboard. He's heading home. Then we'll meet him there. They turned off onto the dirt track, the tires chewing through wet soil. The forest closed around them, tall pines standing like sentinels, their branches heavy with fog. When they reached the old sawmill, dawn had just begun to break. The air smelled of moss and iron. Deputies fanned out, flashlights sweeping. "Evan!" Hannah shouted. Her voice carried into the woods, echoed back softer, thinner. A crow startled from a branch above, flapping into the gray light. Then a voice, faint and childlike, drifted through the trees. "You shouldn't have come." Hannah spun toward the sound. Evan stood a dozen yards away, barefoot, his borrowed clothes torn. His face was pale, his expression eerily calm. "Evan, stop!" she called, stepping closer. "You don't have to go back." He smiled faintly. "It's already calling." Behind him, the forest floor shimmered, disturbed soil arranged in a near-perfect circle. In the center lay a metal hatch half buried in pine needles, its edges newly cleaned. "The root chamber," Hannah whispered. Dalton raised his weapon. "Stay where you are!" Evan didn't move. He simply looked upward, eyes glassy. He said the air was safe today, and with that, he pulled the hatch open and vanished below. "Damn it!" Dalton shouted, rushing forward. Hannah followed without hesitation. The ladder descended nearly 40 feet before opening into a cavernous room. The air was cold and dry, humming with low machinery. Massive concrete pillars rose into darkness, cables twisting between them like veins. Hannah landed first, gun drawn, flashlight cutting through the gloom. "Evan!" No answer. Dalton dropped behind her, his boots echoing. "This is bigger than the others combined." They moved cautiously. The chamber branched into corridors, each leading deeper underground. Along the walls hung photographs, grainy black and white images of families in bunkers, children playing under fluorescent lights. Hannah stopped at one labeled Sanctuary 2, 1994. Each child's face was numbered. At the edge of the photo stood a tall man in welding goggles. "Vernon Howe," she said quietly. Dalton swore under his breath. So he lived on and built more. A sound interrupted them. A faint metallic rhythm, like footsteps dragging on steel. They followed the echo through a narrow passage until it opened into a circular chamber. At its center stood a man. He was old, gray hair long and tangled, face lined but alert. He wore a faded work jacket stained with rust, his hands gloved. Before him, a wall of monitors flickered with static, showing live feeds of the forest above. Vernon Howe turned slowly toward them, a faint smile on his lips. "You found the heart," he said, voice low but steady. Hannah leveled her weapon. "Step away from the console." He chuckled. "Always the same words from your kind, authority without understanding." "Where's Evan?" she demanded. "Home," Howe said simply. "Where he belongs. You manipulated him. You trapped a child underground and called it protection. I saved him," Howe snapped. "The world up there eats people. Your wars, your poisons, your greed. I built a refuge. And he was the proof that innocence could survive." Dalton's voice was sharp. "You brainwashed him into obedience. That's not salvation, it's captivity." Howe's gaze flicked to the ceiling cameras. "You'll never grasp it." They all begged to return once they saw what the surface had become. Hannah took a cautious step forward. "How many others are alive?" Howe smiled faintly. "Enough to start again," a voice echoed from behind them. "He's right." They turned. Evan stood in the doorway, expression blank, eyes fixed on the old man. "Evan?" Hannah said softly. "Don't listen to him." Howe extended a gloved hand. "You know the truth, my son. You've seen their sickness. Come back below where it's clean." Evan's lips trembled. "You said she'd be waiting." "She is," Howe whispered. "In the light below." In the safe, Hannah stepped between them. Evan, your mother died trying to get you out. She didn't want this house face hardened. She was weak. The word hit like a spark. Evan's expression twisted. Pain, memory, anger. You said she walked away. She did. Into death, Evan's voice cracked. You killed her. Howe's smile faltered. I preserved her peace. Hannah saw the change in Evan's stance, his body trembling, fists clenched. You lied, Evan said. You always lied. Howe reached toward him. I made you pure. But Evan stepped back, shaking his head. No, you made me afraid. The old man's eyes flicked toward the console. His hand darted for a switch. Hannah fired. The shot rang through the chamber, echoing off the concrete. Howe staggered, clutching his shoulder, and fell to one knee. Sparks erupted from the console as bullets shattered glass. Evan! Hannah shouted. Get back! The alarms began instantly, red lights flashing, sirens wailing. Overhead, metal doors groaned as the tunnels started to seal. Dalton grabbed Evan's arm. Move, kid! They ran, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Behind them, Howe's voice echoed, hoarse but still defiant. You can't kill the safe. It's in the roots. Flames burst from the wiring, heat flooding the passage. Hannah felt the air thicken, her lungs burning. Up the ladder, Dalton barked. Evan climbed first, hands bleeding, tears mixing with soot. Hannah followed close behind, her chest heaving. When they reached the surface, dawn had turned gold. The hatch slammed open behind them with a hiss of steam. They collapsed among the pine needles, coughing. Dalton hauled himself out last, gasping. Below, the chamber roared. A dull, thunderous collapse. They backed away as the ground trembled once more, and the hatch sank inward, swallowed by smoke and dirt. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The forest was silent except for the wind in the branches. Then Evan whispered, It's gone. Hannah looked at him, his face streaked with ash, eyes wide with shock. Not all of it, she said quietly. There are 11 more. The forest burned for 2 days. Not a roaring wildfire, but a slow, smoldering collapse. Columns of smoke twisting through the pines as the underground chambers imploded one by one. The ground sank in uneven pockets where concrete gave way, swallowing trees and soil in muffled thunder. By the third morning, the fires were dying. Deputies moved through the haze with respirators, tagging unstable ground and sealing perimeters. Hannah stood at the edge of the largest crater, ash clinging to her jacket, her face pale beneath the grime. Below, where the root chamber had been, there was only darkness and rubble. Dalton joined her, his voice muffled through his mask. State's taking over the cleanup. They've got engineers on site. She nodded absently. Any sign of him? He knew who she meant. None. If Howe was still alive down there, he's gone now. She watched a curl of smoke drift upward, spiraling into the clear blue morning. Gone isn't the same as over. Dalton hesitated. You think the others are still active? Somewhere. Her voice was quiet but certain. He said it himself. The roots. It's all connected. The other bunkers could be tied to the same network. Dalton sighed. We'll search every square foot if we have to. But for now, you need rest. I'll rest when I stop hearing his voice, she said. He gave a small nod, the kind that meant he understood but didn't agree, then walked back toward the vehicles. Later, at the temporary shelter, Dr. Kane examined Evan under soft, fluorescent light. The young man sat quietly, arms wrapped around himself, eyes unfocused. Physically, he's fine, Kane told Hannah. Dehydrated, mild shock, but nothing critical. Mentally, he hesitated. It'll take time. Decades underground. His reality's built on lies. Hannah knelt beside Evan. You're safe now, she said softly. He blinked slowly. Safe, he echoed, as if testing the word for meaning. You don't have to go back. His lips trembled. He said the light would burn us. She lifted his hand and held it beneath the lamp. See? No burns. For a moment, he stared, transfixed. Then tears welled in his eyes. I don't remember the sun. Hannah's own throat tightened. You'll see it again soon. Evan nodded faintly. He built them for people like me. The ones he said were chosen. What happens when they wake up? We'll make sure they're found, she said. Every one of them. He looked up. You'll go back down there? If that's what it takes. That night the forest was eerily quiet. The fires had gone out, leaving only the hiss of cooling stone. Hannah sat on the hood of her car. The stars reflected faintly in the windshield. Dalton joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Can't sleep either? Not since the bunker. He handed her a cup. For what it's worth, the governor's calling it one of the biggest illegal confinement cases in state history. You did good. She gave a small, tired smile. We stopped one man, but the system he built, his myths, people like him don't die easy. Dalton nodded slowly. You think he planned for this? Maybe. He wanted the world below to outlive him. They fell into silence. The pines swayed gently, their tops glinting silver in the moonlight. Somewhere deep in the woods, something creaked. Just wood settling, or maybe something else shifting beneath the soil. Do you ever wonder, Dalton said quietly, what it does to people, staying underground that long? Hannah stared into the dark. I think it changes what they dream about. When you can't see the horizon, you start to imagine a safer cage. The next morning, Hannah visited Evan again. He was sitting by the shelter window, sunlight warming his face. He didn't flinch from it this time. She sat across from him. Do you remember anything else about the other bunkers? He thought for a long time. He said they were like veins. Each one carried breath to the next. If one fell, the others would close. Automatic seals? He nodded. To keep the sickness out. She jotted a note. Then, when the root chamber collapsed, they all went dark, Evan said softly. But he's not gone. Her pen stopped. What do you mean? Evan looked at her with unsettling calm. He said the roots listen. They learn. She felt a chill crawl through her chest. Evan, what roots? He smiled faintly, as though remembering a lullaby. The machines. They grow, Kane approached from the doorway, but Hannah lifted a hand. Quiet. Evan, she said, do you hear him now? He blinked. Not him. Just the hum. It never stopped. The lights above them flickered once, briefly, then steadied. The hum of the generator outside deepened for a moment, like a slow exhale. Hannah stood, unsettled. Rest, Evan. I'll be back later. When she stepped outside, the air smelled of rain again. Deputies were packing up equipment, their radios crackling with distant chatter. She looked back toward the tree line, where faint smoke still drifted upward in the distance. The forest looked peaceful, ordinary. But as she watched, she thought she felt the faintest tremor underfoot. A pulse, rhythmic and patient, like something still breathing below. That night she sat in her motel room, finishing her report. The final sentence came easily. Investigation ongoing. Subject E under protective supervision. Remaining sites under excavation order. She saved the file, closed the laptop, and leaned back in the chair. The clock read 11:59 p.m. From somewhere outside, faint static whispered through her police radio, though she hadn't turned it on. Then, through the static, a voice, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Detective Pierce. You've only cut one route. The radio went silent. Hannah stared at it, unmoving, the soft whir of the ceiling fan filling the space where his voice had been. After a long moment, she stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the forest. The pines stretched endless and dark, swaying gently under the moonlight. She whispered, not yet safe. And the trees seemed to whisper it back. 6 months later, spring returned to Beaumont County. The forest had begun to heal. Charred trunks still stood like gravestones among the new green undergrowth, but the air smelled of rain and sap again. Wildflowers bloomed along the back roads where police tape once fluttered. At the edge of the forest, a chain-link fence surrounded what remained of the root chamber site. Federal investigators had stripped it to bare earth, removing debris, cataloging every rusted screw and scorched cable. The pit was now filled, seeded with young pines, an attempt at erasure that fooled no one who had seen what lay beneath. Detective Hannah Pierce stood by the fence, wind lifting her hair. She had come alone this time. Her badge still hung at her belt, but she hadn't worn it in weeks. The department had given her extended leave, the polite term for recovery that wasn't happening fast enough. She watched a crow circle above the trees, its cry echoing faintly. "Still here," she murmured. The forest answered only with wind. In the months since the collapse, 11 bunker sites had been found across 3 states. Most were empty, abandoned decades earlier, stripped of supplies, walls coated in mold. But 2 contained remains, adults and children both. And in one, recovered deep under the limestone, investigators had found a functioning generator still humming, feeding power to a single intercom line buried under a false wall. No one had touched it. When technicians cut the power, they swore they heard a voice whisper their names. The official report listed the case as the Beaumont Bunker Network, theorizing it began as a Cold War survivalist project that evolved into a cult. But Hannah knew that was too clean, too explainable. Howe had built more than bunkers. He had built belief systems, underground cathedrals of obedience, and some beliefs didn't die when their prophet did. Evan Marsh lived now in a state care facility 2 towns over, where the windows faced open fields. He rarely spoke, but sometimes the nurses said they found him outside at dawn, barefoot in the grass, hands pressed against the soil as if listening for something below. Once a week, Hannah drove to see him. She never wore her uniform. She just brought coffee and sat with him under the oak tree near the gate. On this visit, the air was soft with new leaves. Evan sat cross-legged on the grass, watching ants crawl over his shoes. "They say the forest is growing back," he said quietly. "It is," Hannah replied. "The soil's good there. Always was." He nodded. "I still dream about it sometimes, the tunnels, the hum. It feels like they're breathing." She hesitated. Dreams fade eventually. He looked at her, faint smile touching his lips. "Do they?" Hannah didn't answer. After a moment, he added, "I remember something new every week. Little things. My mother humming. The way the sun used to come through our kitchen window. But sometimes, I remember his voice instead. I hate that it still feels real. It'll lose its shape," she said softly. "Voices always do if you stop answering them." He looked out across the field. "You think he's gone?" "I think the man's gone," Hannah said. "The idea might take longer." They sat in silence for a long time. Bees drifted lazily among the clover. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew, a low, mournful sound that faded into the wind. When she finally stood to leave, Evan didn't look up. He just said, "If the roots remember, tell them I'm sorry." Her throat tightened, but she only nodded. "I will." That evening, Hannah returned to her house on the edge of town. The sun had already dipped low, setting the treetops on fire with orange light. She poured herself coffee, sat by the window, and looked toward the horizon where the forest began. She had kept one thing from the investigation, a single photograph found among Howe's archives. It showed the first bunker in construction, 1969. Men in overalls standing beside poured concrete walls. On the back, in faded pencil, someone had written, "The soil listens better than men." She traced the words with her thumb, then tucked the photo back into the envelope. Her radio, an old handheld model she'd used for years, sat on the counter. She hadn't turned it on since the night she heard Hal's voice through static. Still, sometimes, late at night, she swore she could hear faint clicking from inside it. Not quite speech, just a pulse, steady as a heartbeat. She told herself it was nothing, but she never threw it away. At dusk, she drove one last time to the forest fence. The guards recognized her and let her through without question. She parked near the center of the cleared site, where the soil had been freshly seeded with grass. The wind was warm, carrying the smell of rain. She crouched, pressed her palm to the ground. It was cool, damp, alive. "You're free now," she whispered. She wasn't sure if to Evan, to the dead, or to herself. A single firefly rose from the grass, glowing once, twice, then vanishing into the dark. Hannah stood, brushed the dirt from her hands, and turned toward her car. Behind her, as the night settled in, the new pines whispered softly in the wind, a sound almost like breathing.